how do we start this one?
What is the textbook definition of jump scare?
So I have the Wikipedia page up because it's like the most trusted. I've heard many times it's like the most trusted website.
Yeah. So
For
Wikipedia
research.
it's kind of like all the information on there comes directly from the experts.
Yes.
And it's one of the most reliable sources, at least
It's
that
like-
I can think of.
It's like bulletproof in terms of like who can and can't
Yeah.
put stuff on there.
Exactly.
Yeah. So the oh god, it's even a .org website. Which is weird.
Are you recording this? Because
Yeah.
thank God.
We're already in it, so we're not gonna start over. we don't start over on this channel.
We don't believe in second chances around here. But I was sitting away from my mic. Could you still hear me okay?
Yeah, you're fine.
Okay.
So a jump scare, according to Wikipedia, is a technique often used in horror films, haunted attractions, video games, etc., intended to scare the audience by surprising them with an abrupt change in image or event, usually co-occurring with a frightening sound. That's important. Mostly loud screaming. Common in film since the 1980s, the jump scare has been described as one of the most basic building blocks of horror movies. We'll leave it there for now. I'll read some more stuff later.
Okay.
There are a couple of things I want to... let's touch on... So the title of this video is going to be Jump Scares Aren't Really Scary.
Okay. I think we're done then.
And that's it. 2-minute show.
If you like what you heard...
So I think we kind of agreed on this topic because I think we both kind of have a similar agreement on jump scares.
Yeah.
And why, despite the fact that we're both kind of new to the horror genre, we find them absurd for the most part.
Well, I think that's it's something that I kind of realized quickly in my horror watching career,
Yeah.
if you will. I kind of caught on that jump scares did not make a scary horror movie. It was something that I feel like from the beginning, and I'm glad I kind of caught on to it, but from the beginning I shied away from the movies that were mainly jump scares. And I think part of that was because my younger, less mature self actually just didn't want to feel scared in that way.
Right.
Because that is not necessarily what makes me enjoy watching a scary movie.
Right.
And so I shied away from that because I just didn't want to have to experience that. But also, the more I analyzed it, the more I realized that that's really not, that shouldn't be the point.
Right. There was nothing enjoyable about when I initially started watching. I was never enjoying myself when I watched a movie that was kind of heavily laden, that had a lot of jump scares in it, because it felt cheap almost. Like it felt like it was just eliciting this kind of quick reaction, and then I was just like, well, that was dumb. Nothing happened.
It's
And
almost disrespectful.
I found absolutely. And I found myself saying that a lot. I found myself after a jump scare going, well, what the hell? Why was that? What was that there for? What did that do?
Mm-hmm.
And what I started realizing was there's kind of two avenues of jump scares. And jump scares actually can be very effective in a lot of ways. But when I think the movie that kind of cued me into why I was so negative towards jump scares was the first Ouija movie.
Mm-hmm.
And believe it or not, that movie actually has a couple of effective jump scares. The first jump scare actually is wonderful. It's wonderful in that it's actually pretty downright just disturbing and frightening. Mm-hmm. And it's when I believe I think this is from Ouija. One of the girls, one of the sisters of the main characters, is like in a house, and she walks up the stairs, and then all of a sudden you just see her legs come onto screen, and she's hung herself, right?
Yeah.
And it's just this sharp snap of the rope in the neck, her neck snaps, but there's no weird external sounds. It's just this sudden the sudden death that just kind of jolts you in your seat.
Mm-hmm.
But that to me is effective because, one, there's no external, there's no there's no score or bit of sound from the orchestra or anything like that kind of cues you into the fact that it's a jump scare. It's a jump scare because it's sudden and it's brief. But that worked for me. That one in particular worked for me because it actually had an effect. It cued you into kind of the evil presence and how it could influence the characters that you're going to see.
In order for that to be effective, it has to be a tool rather than the end itself. Like that, the jump scare cannot be what is relied upon to scare you. It has to be kind of it has to be an avenue for how we get to that point.
The quote unquote jump itself, exactly. Yeah, the jump itself can't be what elicits that fear. It has to be the actual effect of what's happening as a result of the jump, or what's happening within that moment, or as a result of that moment, right?
Yes.
And that's why something like a jump scare like that is so effective, because you just realize it puts weight immediately puts weight into the story and what you're experiencing. And then of course that movie kind of takes a downturn from there, and there's one of the worst jump scares I can think of, and it happens a lot in the first Ouija movie actually, is like people will be in a dark house and someone that's not in the room with them will like turn the light on and it'll make the character jump, and there'll be like a and the light will come on. It'll be like, "What's going on?" It's like, okay, that's like a textbook jump scare right there. It elicits an initial shock. You're initially shocked by the light turning on, the new person in the room. There's eerie sounds going on, but then the result is a non-threat was in the room with them and turned a light on.
I think that's the key. I think the key is the non-threat. There has to be consequences in order for a jump scare to matter. Now, because you can truly get scared by a jump scare on screen, but you can also get scared by, a friend popping out from behind a doorway. And then you realize that there is no threat, there is no consequence to the actions that just took place. And automatically that discounts what you're going to see going forward. And the more you experience that, and the more time you spend watching those horror movies that are full of jump scares, you start to come to expect it.
Right.
And they stop affecting you as much.
Right.
To a point where if that's all that is being relied upon, it does not create actual feelings of fear.
Right.
But it's like you said, you get to a point once you kind of understand what is being done with the jump scares. You get to a point where the jump itself does not scare you, and you have to have some sort of effect from it. You have to have an event that takes place that in and of itself will not cause the fear, but maybe the effect of that scene, the effect, whatever that permanent consequence is, in the context of the film, that is what is going to truly cause you to be afraid while you watch the movie.
Right. One of my favorite YouTube reviewers, Jeremy Johns, in a couple of his reviews, he's talked about kind of that idea of, it's so easy to see a jump scare coming. He'll be kind of talking about a scene, and he'll be like, okay, a jump scare's coming in 3, 2, 1, and then something happens. And a lot of time it's jump scares without effect. Conversely from Ouija, one of the most effective films with jump scares is Ouija: Origin of Evil. That movie, and a lot of Flanagan movies, and I think a lot of James Wan horror films do this, where they take the jump scare and kind of turn it on its head, in that they show you the anticipation leading up to the jump scare. Like in Ouija: Origin of Evil, a scene kind of, I think it's in the third act, whenever one of the guys that the older daughter is talking to is like in the house. The younger daughter's already been possessed. There's a scene where he's like reaching through a wall and like trying to pull stuff out of it. And in the background, you see the youngest daughter, her eyes are white and her like neck is like snapping and twisting and convulsing. He can't tell that's happening. So that moment, it in and of it, in its own way is a jump scare because it's sudden and it's quick and it's gone as soon as it's there. Right? But it's so effective because there is so much happening underneath that when you see it happen, you go, "Oh shit!" Like that, it cues you into something. One, something bad is about to happen to this guy because this girl's having a freaking demonic episode behind him. But it kind of lets you know that when the jump happens, when she does something to him, that sudden moment is going to it's going to be effective because we already know that she's there in some manipulative way trying to do something evil, right? So there's a lot of good movies now, or there's a lot of directors now who actually are starting to kind of effectively use the jump scare in a way that they use it to kind of preclude a like bigger moment.
Well, and you
should
in
a non-jump scare moment in the film.
You should have that anticipation because you know that whatever's about to happen is going to carry a lot of weight. Your anticipation should not come from, oh, I wonder what's about to pop out of that window, or I wonder what's going to be standing behind that character once the camera pans around. That should not be where your anticipation comes from, and that's not what should be building that anxiety in you. Because it loses its effectiveness when you start to know it's coming. But if you know it's coming and you also have been getting these clues, that it's actually going to be an important factor, and whatever's about to happen is going to drastically change the course of the story. Right. That's when it really matters, and that's when building that anticipation becomes a good thing. I don't want to be sitting here and, like you said, with Jeremy Jahns, I don't want to be sitting here and saying, well, something's about to pop out, and it does. I don't even flinch, and it does nothing for me. The one that I can think about, and this is really just kind of a classic horror movie trope, which usually carries no weight. And you see this even in some action films and thrillers. The jump scare, unfortunately, has been kind of widely used. Kind of
bleeds into
across
other
genres. And typically in those, it's even worse, I would argue, than in horror movies.
Yeah, usually.
The like, you've seen it 1,000 times, walking into some dark basement or whatever, and like a dead body or a skeleton like falls from the ceiling, or is like you turn and there's a skeleton in the cobwebs. Whatever it is, the skeleton happens to have absolutely no effect on the story whatsoever. It's not actually important. It's just there to freak you out.
Right.
And that kind of thing, when you see that coming, you automatically are kind of losing faith in the story as a whole.
And you lose focus too. It detracts from what the focus should be. The focus shouldn't be on eliciting like these quick, cheap kind of frights. And that's one thing that's so interesting to me about effective and ineffective jump scares is they elicit the same response in your brain.
Yeah.
Right. Just a quick shock. And where they kind of differ is that effective jump scares have in a sort of what's the word? Not like a continued effect. It's something that while the shock is initial, the overarching fear that an effective jump scare kind of puts into your mind is something that's long lasting, right? It's not something that just happens and then it's done and then we're in another scene moving on with the story.
I think that's one of the keys is the initial response. Like you said, it's a fairly quick emotional ride that you go on when it comes to a jump scare.
Right.
But the effective ones leave you feeling uneasy, leave you feeling incomplete based off of what you just saw.
Right.
leave you anticipating what's coming next, not anticipating the next jump scare, anticipating where we are going from here and what else could possibly be coming.
Right.
And that's going to cause me to think about whatever the story is.
Right.
I think the big key with, and I've said it already a number of times, is the big key with jump scares is anticipation, but it's about how they build it and what it is you are anticipating.
Right. What you're anticipating. Yeah. And how, there are so many different ways where you can flip that anticipation on its head. You can completely get rid of the anticipation. And I think one of the more recent examples of that is like in Haunting of Hill House. There are so many instances where a character will look into another room and there'll be a ghost, or there'll be something there that shouldn't be there. And they turn away and look back and it's still there. So what that's done is you get the initial shock of the jump of, oh man, something's in there, but they don't turn a light on. They don't like look away and it's gone. They look away, they do something else. The presence is still there. So
and because of that, the threat is still there.
Right. So in that moment, you're completely disregarding the anticipation of the jump.
Yes.
Because you're cutting straight to the point, and then you're giving the viewer that continued kind of presence of the threat, like you said.
Yes.
It's something that they recognize it's there. They turn away to try and make it go away, but it doesn't go away. Turning the lights on doesn't make it go away.
I think
that to me is so effective, because that's truly what is scary, is when something doesn't go away by turning the lights on. If you turn the lights back off or even on, it's probably still there.
I think of the have you seen Insidious?
Yes, but it's been a minute.
So the red-faced demon in Insidious, the reveal is
where they're like, it's standing right behind you or something like that.
Dude, he looks like Darth Maul looking ass.
Yeah.
From Insidious. I'll see if I can find a picture for you. But the
Darth Maul looking ass. Son of a bitch. Anyway. You Darth Maul look. Imagine if you just turned around and looked at that demon like, you Darth Maul looking ass. He's like, shit, you're right. I'll be gone now. You got me.
If you look like Darth Maul, you can heck right off.
Sick burn. I'm gone.
I'm gone.
I'm going straight back to hell.
No.
Did you find a picture of it?
Yeah, here.
Yeah, show me this.
I know you have seen this before. I know you've seen this.
I think I know of the scene you're talking about.
You'll recognize the still even.
Yeah. Oh man, this is gonna give me nightmares. Oh yeah, dude.
You've seen that, right?
Oh, I hate that so much.
But okay, why this is so effective is because a jump scare should be the start of whatever it is. It should be the introduction to whatever it is you should be fearing. It should not be the end.
No.
It should not be the jump scare should not be the beginning and the end. That's even worse.
That's probably the worst example of a jump scare. Yeah,
exactly.
Is that it is in its whole a complete like piece, like a set piece to a story. The beginning and end is the jump scare, and then you're on to another scene or another moment or a different location. That in it, yeah, exactly. That's one of the worst examples of an ineffective jump scare, is one that begins and ends in a moment, and then it's just gone.
Yeah, and so I don't, just to kind of give a little more context to, and I don't know Insidious that well, but with this reveal, the grandmother is talking about how she saw this scary figure in a dream, and as she's talking about it, we see the reveal of this red-faced demon popping out behind. And that's the reveal. That's showing you the threat is real. That is kind of setting up this new threat that we're gonna face, that the character's gonna face, and really that's the key to me.
Right.
It has to. it has to serve a purpose, and if the
Right.
purpose is truly to introduce us to whatever it is that's going to prey on us for
To
the rest
something
of the
truly
movie.
sinister.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
I think there's also a way you can use kind of smaller, seemingly ineffective jump scares to build to an even bigger one. That's what's so effective to me about what one of the things that was so effective to me about Ouija Origin of Evil is you get so many scenes once they buy the board of the youngest daughter looking through the thing. I don't know what it's called. I've never played with a Ouija board, but the thing you actually drag around and then you look through the glass and you're supposed to see the spirit or whatever. There are a lot of moments in that movie where you see people kind of looking through and there's nothing there until a moment where there is something there, but it's so quick and fleeting that it seems so ineffective. But then you get to the actual moment of possession where she's looking through and she sees this sinister figure behind her that actually grabs her and freaking like shoves its arm down her throat, and then that's when the possession happens. So there are these ways that may seem ineffective where you can use jump scares that, again, they're always building to something actually sinister, and they can be small that lead up to something, but they always have to have some sort of larger overarching purpose to go towards.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why we say, for the most part, jump scares aren't scary, because the most ineffective ones are always the most noticeable ones because they're loud, they're obvious, and more often than not, they're obnoxious. The way music is used in jump scares, in ineffective jump scares, is so just blatantly disrespectful. And it's one of those things that kind of gives you the cue. It kind of gives you that feeling of, oh, I know when this is coming, because it's always in a quieter moment. It kind of gives you that feeling of predictability, right?
Yeah,
The kind of lack of music, and then all of a sudden this jarring moment of just extreme sound.
So everything that you kind of just said made me think of a point that we actually haven't talked about this, but I think part of the problem with jump scares then becomes the filmmakers who take advantage of that anticipation that we have for the jump scares. They know that we have learned when a jump scare is coming. They know that we are kind of beyond the point of really truly being afraid of those jump scares. So that's when we start to get things like the music swelling up as a character turns a corner and there's nothing there.
Right.
And there's films, just as many films that are filled with jump scares. There are equally as much that are filled with jump scare fake outs that set the scene for a jump scare just because they know we're expecting it, and then there's nothing. They try to build the tension, and then there's no release. And so jump scares have created a bigger problem than just kind of those cheap scares. They've created a problem where now we have films that are kind of taking advantage of that in multiple ways.
Right.
We'll get a jump scare, or we'll get a fake out where the camera pans around and you're expecting something behind the character and there's nothing there, but then the character turns around and then they get scared.
And then it's there, right?
And we start getting those, and that's in my opinion just as unacceptable a way to try to scare us.
Well, and the reason why it's so obvious is because everyone does it in the same way. Like that scene you just described where the camera does a full circle pan, there's nothing there, and then we cut to them turning around, and then it's there, and then you cut to the actual object.
Yes.
That is such a well-worn and often used example of a jump scare that when you see that scene start to happen, you go, oh, okay, it's about to happen. This is about to happen.
Right.
Now, there are some movies that very effectively build up tension before a jump scare. And what comes to mind, which is a movie we'll talk about eventually, is It.
Yeah.
It Chapter 1 does such a good job of using jump scares, but it it first builds the tension in a very effective way. Like the scene for me that comes to mind is the scene in the library when I believe it's Mike Hanlon is reading through books, trying to figure things out. And there are a few things happening. One is there's the librarian behind him in the back.
Standing there with a giant grin on her face.
Mm-hmm. Creepy as hell. Mm-hmm. And then obviously he's reading a story, and as he flips through the pages, he gets closer and closer on these images of a boy with a severed head in a tree.
Yep.
And then we see the balloon float. He follows the balloon, and then I believe he follows the eggs.
The eggs.
And
because
then
it jumps out and calls him Egg Boy.
Right. Hey, Egg Boy. And then so
yes.
all of those moments kind of come together. And a lot of them are so quiet and almost hard to notice if you're not really paying attention. But they build this tension to then the point where he gets down kind of in the lower levels, and all of a sudden the clown's chasing him, and that's the jump scare. But for the 3 minutes before that, you were getting all these tiny little notes that were cueing you into the fact that something is about to happen to him,
right? And
it could very well kill him,
right? And
it's that's such an effective way to get to a jump scare by building real, tangible tension.
Yes, and
in a scene.
It uses jump scares so brilliantly because it's almost always it making some show of power, playing his game with these kids,
right,
and with the people of this town, where you can see he's getting enjoyment out of it, but it makes it the monster itself. It makes it so much more scary because we're starting to see what he's truly capable of. And in each of these instances where there is a jump scare, and most of the characters in the movie, at some point, there's some sort of jump scare involving it. Right. But it's always to build up the monster itself as this kind of otherworldly, powerful being that we know now that they're capable of doing really anything they want to haunt us. And that's where the scares come from.
It shows the power of manipulation, which is one of the biggest fears I think humans probably have, is the idea that they're being manipulated to do something or go somewhere.
Exactly.
Yeah, So
I wanted to touch on the idea you kind of talked about, just that cliche, that horror movie cliche camera shot where the camera pans around.
Right.
One of the things that I can think of that makes that effective when it is done right is when the audience sees a threat that the character does not know is there. And it doesn't have to be lingered on. We just need to know
that it's there.
It's
already there.
It builds anxiety knowing that there is a threat to us, a threat to the character that they are completely unaware of. And later when that jump scare comes for them, it's effective in kind of giving us that told you so moment, but that moment of helplessness when we know it's coming and we know that we cannot stop it. Right. One that I can think of that does that super well, and it's a TV show, we've referenced it a ton of times, is Hill House. There are so many shots in Hill House where there's a ghost just somewhere in the shot. Or you can see, a face in the railing of the staircase.
Dude, literally the opening scene of the show when the youngest daughter's having thinks the bent neck lady is there. Yeah. And then dad tells her a story and then tells her to go to sleep. And then we linger on that scene for a moment, and then the bent lady just kind of slowly crawls out. Yep. That builds so much anticipation to where that ghost is going to take hold of her character. It's kind of that told you so moment, and I don't want to get into spoilers because I would never want to spoil this show because of how, but there are the told you so moment with the bent neck lady storyline is one of the it's so wonderfully done. How they kind of play that narrative out. But you're right, it's a moment that kind of sets up the helplessness because one, it proves that people don't believe her, one. And that creates a sense of helplessness, not just in her, but in us, because we see that she's right, but everyone around her who would be seen as authority or someone who could help her doesn't.
Well, and it preys on our innate will to help others. We want people to believe her because we know she's right. We want to protect these characters from whatever it is that is haunting them.
Yeah.
And when done properly, these scares rob us of that ability. It makes you sit there and know exactly what's about to happen and know that you're not able to stop it. Makes you sit there and know that this kid is right, that there is something to actually be afraid of.
Right.
And you have to sit there and be just as helpless as they are.
I think that example kind of speaks to how why we say bad jump scares are cheap, because there are so many easy fixes to these jump scares that you could implement. Like the idea you said, where if we're doing that pan around, if we as the viewer see something that's a threat that makes the character helpless, but they don't, that is an effective solution to just going, circle around, nothing there, okay, turn around, oh, there it is.
Yes.
Because in that moment, we don't know it's that we're meant to assume it's not there at all, and then we're hit with the loud music and the monster, and the shock is there, and then it goes away. Whereas if we see it, if we get just that little bit of, oh man, she's in trouble, that actually creates a true sense of fear in your brain when you're watching things unfold in that moment.
Right.
Yeah.
It has to build, to some degree, it has to build that anxiety within us, because if we are just waiting to kind of see what happens next, we don't get that same feeling.
Right.
But if we know that if we as viewers are fully aware of whatever it is that is out there, whatever the ghost is, whatever the monster is, regardless of the case, it builds anxiety in us because we're afraid of this, of the threat, and it's giving us that fight or flight, right?
Right.
That maybe the characters have yet to experience, but we know that they're going to.
Yeah.
The other example I can think of kind of that cheap jump scare, and it kind of plays off to what I've already said, is a character having like a nightmare, and then they wake up, but then there's actually a ghost behind them, or something like that.
Right.
And so often, dude, I almost feel cheated when those kinds of things happen. I think it can be effective having in a horror movie a character have a nightmare and it turns out to be fake. There's no threat, but we of course know what we're watching, and we know that eventually there will be. Right. And we're going to talk about The Descent, but they use that just briefly in one scene very effectively.
Yes, they do. Yes, they do.
But so it just feels like so often when I'm expecting more is the times that I feel the most disappointed, because those jump scares are oftentimes, they're not enough to really, they're just not enjoyable. They don't add to the movie.
They don't do anything to rope you in. Right. They if anything, they just create more of a disconnect than what you might already be experiencing by poor writing, characterization. Yeah. On and on and on. I think that's it, man. We went a little longer than I think we wanted to.
Yeah, a little bit.
Here's the thing: when you got something you're passionate about, and there's something you don't like, it's easy to kind of ramble on.
Well, and here's the thing.
But I think we found a good stopping point.
Jump scares aren't scary.
No, they are not. You want to take them out?
Yeah, dude, I'd love to.
Those guys?
Nice.
Thank you.
All right, guys. So, if you liked our discussion today, if you like horror movies, we'd love to hear your thoughts about it. Give us a subscribe on all of our channels on YouTube. Also, check out the podcast, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, pretty much anywhere that you listen to podcasts. It'll be there. We want to hear your thoughts. We want to see your reviews. Also, keep an eye out. Next week, we're going to be starting our real deep dive into horror movies. We'll be revealing both of our top fives, kind of breaking them down side by side, leading up to Halloween. We have 5 episodes coming out next week, so keep an eye out for that. As always, thanks for the support, and catch us real soon. We'll be back with our biggest week yet.
9 different movies we're going to be talking about over a 5-day period. So they're kind of more just kind of standard recaps and reviews, less like our
We won't talk for
form.
this long.
Right. It'll be much shorter than this, but I hope you guys enjoy, and I look forward to talking about them. Should be fun.
It's spooky season.
Oh yeah, baby. It's always spooky season.
Yeah. I need to go
when it's cold.
I need to go look at Wikipedia and find some more rock solid sources for these.
Rock solid.
My gosh.
Wikipedia.com.